The clatter of the good porcelain echoed in the silence, a fragile sound in a house built for noise. I had set 3 plates out, though I knew better than to expect 2 of them to be filled. The lemon cake, cooling under its mesh dome, scented the morning air with false hope. I had dressed in my finest blouse, pressed and ready, waiting for the familiar warmth of family to break the stillness. But by 4 o'clock the tea was cold, the plates were empty, and the only break in the quiet was a sharp, unexpected knock at the door. I smoothed the crumbs from my lap, my heart beating a frantic, foolish rhythm, expecting a late apology. Instead, I opened the door to a stranger holding a warm meal in one hand, and a thin, white envelope in the other. That envelope, meant for my son, was a confession, a meticulously detailed plan for my quiet, planned removal from my own life. Everything I thought I knew about my family, my future, and my security crumbled into dust right there on the threshold of my home. The holiday used to be my favorite day of the year. Not for the ritualized trinkets or the mass-produced sentiment, but because it was the sole 24 hours when my family seemed to recall I was Eleanor Vance. Before I became merely Eleanor, the distant address, the inconvenient phone number, the afterthought. When Arthur, my son, was small, he would drag a tray into my bedroom, usually spilling half the orange juice, proudly presenting construction paper hearts taped haphazardly to a paper plate. When Clara, my granddaughter, was tiny, she would gather wildflowers from the back lawn, her hands stained green, bringing them to me in tight fists, the stems bent, petals already falling away. Those were the years this house felt like a home, a sanctuary built of shared laughter and small, tangible acts of love. This morning, the silence was a physical weight, heavier than usual. I rose early, making the bed with surgical precision, putting on my Sunday blouse, the pearl-buttoned silk, just in case they decided to stop by. I even retrieved the heirloom china, the set with the delicate blue roses that only saw light twice a year, Christmas and this day. The night before, I had baked a lemon pound cake, letting it cool beneath the protective mesh dome, following the exact instructions my own mother had passed down. I played the internal game of denial. Maybe they're simply running late. Brunch turned into lunch, and lunch will surely segue into dinner. I was determined not to surrender hope before noon. By 11, the kitchen was prepared for a gathering that would never materialize. I brewed a fresh pot of herbal tea. I laid out linen napkins. I sliced the cake into perfect symmetrical pieces and arranged 3 portions on the serving tray. One for myself, one for Arthur, and one for Clara. I did not prepare a slice for Veronica, Arthur's wife. Experience had taught me better than to anticipate her presence. I made a single call to Arthur's phone. It rang 5 times, the sound loud and hollow in the immaculate kitchen, before slipping into voicemail. I refused to leave a message. He knew the date. I would not lower myself to beg for remembrance. By 2 in the afternoon, my vigil at the dining table was over. I conceded the battle to the clock and carried my plate into the living room. I settled into my favorite upholstered chair, the one facing the broad front window, where I could watch the parade of neighbors celebrating their own connections. Balloons, brightly colored gift bags, and plastic containers filled with potato salad moved across the street. I watched Ms. Hartley's daughter pull into the driveway, carrying a massive floral bouquet, wearing high heels, a clear sign of respect for her mother. My tea was lukewarm now. I tried to reason away the abandonment. Perhaps traffic was horrendous. Perhaps a last-minute crisis intervened. Perhaps they simply forgot. But a darker voice cut through the justifications. No, Veronica would never permit them to forget. That woman managed her household with the rigid structure of a courtroom. If this was a deliberate absence, it was calculated. I ate the pound cake piece by piece, alone in the silence. I would not cry. I held the fork like a scepter, a defiant symbol of my own self-worth, and ate every morsel as though it were served in a 5-star establishment. I had lived long enough to internalize the bitter truth. Once you relinquish your place as the epicenter of your child's world, you morph into background noise. The profound love you offered becomes something they simply grow out of. It was around 4 o'clock when the sharp, undeniable knock sounded at the front door. My heart surged, a wild, foolish bird in my chest. It came. Finally. I thought perhaps Clara insisted. Perhaps Arthur yielded. I smoothed my blouse automatically, brushed invisible crumbs from my skirt, and walked toward the door with slow, deliberate steps, forcing myself to exhale. When I opened it, it was not Arthur. It was a young man in a brown delivery uniform, carrying a large insulated catering bag and a pristine white envelope. "Delivery for Vance," he stated. "That's me," I managed, blinking in confusion. "Great. Running a little late, sorry. Here's the food, and this came with it." He handed me the warm bag and the envelope. I thanked him, my mind scrambling for an explanation. Arthur had surprised me with food before, sending a pie when Clara had the flu and couldn't visit. Maybe this is his clumsy, guilt-ridden way of compensating for their absence, I thought, forcing a sad smile. "Enjoy, ma'am," the man said, returning to his vehicle. I carried the bag into the kitchen and set it on the counter. The immediate aroma of stuffed chicken breasts, creamy mashed potatoes, and roasted asparagus hit me, and my stomach registered a faint growl. I opened the bag. Inside were containers, all neatly labeled for 3 distinct people. I managed a slightly hopeful smile. Even a sad, small peace offering was something. Then I opened the envelope. The world seemed to halt. It was not a greeting card. It was not a belated message from Arthur or Clara, or even Veronica. It bore a letterhead: Golden Pines Sanctuary. A high-end facility, the kind advertised with polished wood floors, private spa packages, and meticulously maintained scenic walking trails. Initially, I dismissed it as a mistake. Junk mail. But then I saw the identifying information. "Welcome to your future residence at Golden Pines Sanctuary." Below that, my name, Eleanor Vance. And below that, my son's email address, arthur.vance@gmail.com. The form was terrifyingly comprehensive. It detailed a confirmed move-in date. It listed my known allergies, my current medications, and, sickeningly, a preferred payment method linked directly to my personal checking account. My account. My legs felt instantly numb. I gripped the cool edge of the granite counter to prevent myself from collapsing. I forced myself to read the document again, slower this time. This was not a promotional flyer. This was not a subtle suggestion. This was a finalized welcome packet. Confirmation. I was not merely being overlooked. I was being removed. My son had submitted the entirety of the paperwork. Veronica must have been his silent partner in this operation. They were plotting my quiet, unsuspecting relocation, finalizing my disappearance, while I sat alone waiting for them on this special day. I stood frozen for an unbearable length of time, staring at the papers. My hands were locked on the countertop, my knees rigid. My name, my confidential medical details, my private banking information, all arranged in neat, clinical rows, as if I were a piece of aging furniture being relocated. Not a mother, not a human being, but a problem requiring a discreet solution. My hands began to tremble as I picked up the catering bag again, pulling the packing slip taped to the side. It confirmed the order: 3 plates. 1 for Arthur. 1 for Veronica. 1 for her mother. I was not on the list. I wasn't even significant enough to be an afterthought in their planning. I looked back at the Golden Pines letter. There was a small, square sticky note attached near the top. It was written in Veronica's recognizable, sharp, hurried script. "Here's the packet for Arthur to sign once it's official. She'll be out before summer." Thank God. I lost the ability to draw breath. That note was never intended for my eyes. It was meant for the man I had raised, and the woman I had vainly attempted to placate and get along with. It had fallen into my hands by a bizarre twist of fate, a single clumsy misstep by an indifferent delivery driver, who had handed the wrong envelope to perhaps the right woman. I sank onto the nearest kitchen chair. The house was profoundly silent, yet it felt loud now. My own heartbeat pounded an alarming echo in my ears. The low hum of the refrigerator sounded like a muffled warning. For too long, I had willfully ignored the accumulating signs. The way Veronica would talk over me mid-sentence during shared dinners. The way Arthur's calls had dwindled, resurfacing only when he required a favor or a specific task. The subtle, persistent discouragement they leveled at Clara when she showed interest in spending time with me. All the pieces snapped into terrible focus. They hadn't been hoping I would recover. They had been meticulously planning around my continued existence. I recalled a casual conversation from the previous autumn. Arthur had inquired if I had updated my will. He suggested we streamline my finances. At the time I was grateful. I believed he was simply being a responsible son, looking out for my future. I hadn't realized he was sizing up the opportunity to take over. And Veronica. She had always loathed this house, claiming it was too vintage, too cluttered, utterly lacking in decent resale potential. I should have understood last Christmas when she offered to help me declutter, that she was actually performing an appraisal. I pushed myself up and walked purposefully down the hallway, toward the linen closet where I stored my father's old fireproof safe box. I opened it and retrieved my financial folder. Bank statements, property deeds, insurance policies. I flipped through until I located the account number listed on the retirement packet. There it was, my primary checking account. I had granted Arthur emergency access 5 years prior, following my hip surgery. Just in case, I had told myself. He had clearly leveraged that access to initiate the substantial deposit required for the facility. I wasn't sure which reality inflicted the deeper wound, that he was doing this at all, or that he was executing it with such utter cowardice, plotting in secrecy, lacking even the basic decency to sit me down and feign concern for my own good. They had intended to surprise me, a twisted holiday present. Happy Mother's Day, Ma. You're being evicted from your life. The kettle on the stove began its sudden, piercing whistle. I hadn't even registered turning on the burner. I shut it off and poured a cup of water, more for the calming mechanics of the motion than the desire for comfort. I took the phone and walked into the living room, settling onto the worn couch. The very same couch where Arthur used to sprawl with his head in my lap when he had a childhood fever. The one where Clara once curled up, listening raptly to my stories about my own girlhood. The couch where I sat, every year, waiting for someone to acknowledge that I still mattered. I placed the envelope beside me and dialed Arthur's number. It rang 4 times before he answered. His voice was deliberately casual, slightly distracted. Hey Ma. Sorry I couldn't call earlier. It's been a hectic day. How are you? Hectic, of course. I'm fine, I said, my voice quiet, astonishingly steady. I just had some unexpected mail delivered. A pause stretched out, instantly changing the atmosphere on the line. Oh, what kind of mail? A welcome packet, I replied. From Golden Pines Sanctuary. Silence. I believe it was intended for you, but the delivery driver gave it to me instead. More silence. I could hear his strained breathing, then a muffled, fumbling sound, as if he were trying to cover the mouthpiece, followed by a sharp, low whisper. She knows. Waited. Look, Ma, he finally managed. We were going to talk to you about that. No, Arthur, you absolutely were not, I countered. We were just trying to figure out the best way to help. Veronica thought, I cut in. Veronica does not know me. And you clearly don't either. His voice cracked just perceptibly. It's not like that. I stood slowly, holding the phone in one hand and the damning envelope in the other. You sent me food as if I were a stray dog. You cancelled the holiday. You accessed my money, and now you're finalizing plans to remove me from the home your father and I built, the home I let you grow up in. He sighed, the sound grating. You're being dramatic. No, I said. I'm seeing it clearly, Arthur, for the first time in a very long time. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't permit a single tear. I simply stated my final decree. Don't come here again. I'll make my own arrangements. Then I hung up. My hands were perfectly steady. I surveyed my home and I made a decision. I would not be erased quietly. The phone did not ring again that night. Arthur did not call back. No hurried, apologetic texts arrived. No explanation was offered. I suppose once exposed, there is very little left to communicate, unless it is accompanied by shame or decency, qualities my son seemed to lack. I sat there for what felt like an eternity. The welcome packet lay on the couch beside me, repulsive, like a snake that had silently slithered into my house. The more I examined it, the more lucid the reality became. This was not a reactive decision. This was a deliberate, quiet, coordinated betrayal, disguised beneath polite smiles and conveniently missed phone calls. While I sat knitting blankets and baking lemon cakes, scanning the mailbox for holiday cards, they were counting the days until I could be labeled, tucked away, and stored in a soft, scheduled room meant for women who were fading. I was not fading, and I would absolutely refuse to be stored. The following morning I rose early. I did not cry. I did not waste time mourning the why. I wrapped the uneaten cake, tossed the cold tea, and went straight to my file cabinet. There were still a few essential things I had kept untouched, assets Arthur had never gained access to. My lawyer's direct number was one of them. I called before I even considered breakfast. Julia Thorne. We had attended high school together back in 1966. She had left for college, then law school, and now ran her own modest practice close by. I hadn't spoken to her in years, but she answered on the second ring, as if we were still seated next to one another in history class. "Eleanor Vance," she said warmly. "Haven't heard from you in too long. What is going on?" "I need to change my will," I stated. "Today." She didn't pry. She simply told me she would arrive that afternoon. By noon, she was seated in my living room, her briefcase open, a fresh stack of legal papers ready. I poured her coffee and recounted the entire saga. Arthur's scheme, the Golden Pines facility, the financial breach, all of it. Julia listened intently, her expression hardening slowly. "That is elder fraud, Ellie," she confirmed. "Do you want to file criminal charges?" "No," I said firmly. "I want to ensure he never touches another cent of my money ever again. And I need this house secured." We spent 2 hours reviewing my documents. I formally updated my will. I executed the papers to revoke Arthur's power of attorney completely. I restructured the names on all my accounts, transferring ownership into a new living trust, with Julia designated as co-executive. Finally, I transferred the house deed itself into the trust and had Julia notarize the transfer. It felt like I was methodically sealing reinforced bricks over a door that someone had attempted to sneak through in the night. When we finished, Julia looked at me with her sharp, professional eyes. "Do you want him to be notified?" I shook my head slowly. "Not yet," I said. "I'm not finished watching them reveal themselves." Later that same day, I heard from Clara, my granddaughter. She is 17, naturally quiet, always observant, always listening. I hadn't heard from her in months. Not since Christmas, when she had sat beside me at the dinner table and barely uttered a word. I had gloomily assumed Veronica had successfully reached her too, instructing her to maintain a polite distance. But now she was calling. Her voice was quiet, laced with anxiety. "Grandma, are you truly all right?" I took a stabilizing breath. "Why do you ask, baby?" Pause followed. "Dad and Mom were arguing. I overheard something about you being extremely upset about a delivery." I chose my words carefully. I resisted the urge to ask if she was aware of her parents' overall plan, stopping myself instantly. Clara wasn't like them. She still possessed her own moral compass. "I discovered something they desperately did not want me to see," I told her. "And I think I finally found out the actual truth about how they view me." She offered no immediate response. Then she whispered, "I think I already knew that, Grandma." It was at that moment I felt a powerful emotion crack inside me. Not pain but profound relief. Someone inside that house still possessed a conscience. "I want to come see you, Grandma," Clara said. "Whenever you're ready," I replied. "The door is always open. But just you, all right?" "Okay," she agreed. She arrived 2 days later. She had grown noticeably taller, her hair longer. She possessed that transitional look, part woman, part child. Her eyes filled with a complicated mix of guilt and firm resolve. She sat down on the same couch where the confession packet had rested days earlier. She noticed the stark white envelope still sitting on the side table. "I heard Mom say you were overreacting," she recounted. "But I knew it wasn't nothing." I handed her the finalized paperwork. She read the documents slowly, meticulously. When she finished, her hands were visibly trembling. "She lied to me," Clara whispered. "They both did." I offered no response, simply watching her internalize the weight of her parents' betrayal. "Grandma," she asked, looking up, "what are you going to do?" "I've already done it," I told her simply. "I changed everything. They can't touch a single thing now. Not the house, not the money, and certainly not me." Clara looked immediately relieved, followed quickly by a wave of shame. "I'm so sorry I didn't say anything sooner," she whispered. "I knew something wasn't right. I just never knew how I could help you." "You helped just now," I told her gently. We sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then I made her tea, and we drank it together, almost as if nothing profound had occurred, except that, of course, absolutely everything had changed. That night, I slept peacefully for the first time in years. I was not helpless. I was not forgotten. And the house they had attempted to steal still had its sole, legitimate owner: me. It is truly strange how a long-familiar home can feel entirely different once the paralyzing fear of losing it is finally lifted. The walls were the same, the furniture had not moved, but something fundamental had shifted within me. After Clara departed that evening, I walked slowly from room to room in the quiet. I paused deliberately in doorways, running my fingers over the molding, the antique wallpaper, the physical edges of the life I had built. I had invested 46 years in these four walls. I had celebrated life here, grieved here, and grown old here. For a terrifying brief moment, I had allowed myself to believe someone could simply walk in and confiscate it all. No more. The following day, I stood on the porch with my fresh cup of tea, watching the neighborhood wake up. Mr. Franklin across the street was watering his tomato vines. A woman jogged past my mailbox with her golden retriever. It was peaceful, ordinary. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't waiting for anything. No calls, no forced explanations, no other shoe to drop. Then I spotted Veronica's large SUV turning onto the street. It pulled up in front of my house, parking, as was her habit, too aggressively close to the curb. She stepped out, wearing her cream blouse and heels, sunglasses perched like a protective mask. She was alone, carrying only her purse and a thin paper folder. I did not move to invite her inside. She walked up the porch steps, her gait stiff and obviously rehearsed. She stopped precisely at the edge of the porch, clearly startled to find me standing there, utterly calm and unmoved. "Eleanor," she said, forcing a tight, unnatural smile. "Can we talk privately?" "You have precisely 3 minutes," I stated, and took a slow sip of my tea. She cleared her throat. "I think there has been a considerable misunderstanding. Arthur and I were genuinely only trying to do what we felt was best for your well-being. You fabricated my private medical information and initiated a financial transfer to a long-term facility without obtaining my permission or consent," I interrupted, keeping my voice level. "That is not a misunderstanding, Veronica. That is a calculated betrayal." Her smile remained fixed, but a dark flush crept up her neck and stained her cheeks red. "We thought we were helping you." "No," I corrected. "You thought you were successfully getting rid of me." She lifted the folder she held. "The facility is exquisite. You would have enjoyed a private suite, access to a lovely garden, and weekly massages. We only desired to give you comfort." I stared directly at her. "You wish to discuss comfort. Comfort is eating breakfast in my own kitchen. Comfort is choosing precisely when I go outside, when I rest, when I speak. Comfort, Veronica, is freedom, not polished isolation." Her hand twitched slightly. We didn't intend for it to feel like that. Then why was I informed of your plans through a simple delivery mistake? Ask, pressing the point. Why was I not afforded the respect of a simple conversation? She had no answer. I let the weighty silence stretch, allowing her to realize the depth of her exposure. Finally she shifted topics. Look, Eleanor, Arthur is extremely upset. He informed me that you have locked him out of all the accounts. Is that true? Yes, I confirmed. And the will? And the deed to this house? And the trust? All of it? Her eyes blinked once, stunned. You can't legally do that without giving him notification. I can, I stated, entirely unfazed. And I did. Because it is all mine. And because I have finally remembered who I was before your husband attempted to make me feel like a useless burden. Veronica's mouth opened, then slowly closed. She took a step back, as if bracing for a counterattack. I don't know what Clara has told you, she muttered. Clara told me absolutely nothing, I replied. I told her the truth. Veronica's jaw tightened. She turned to leave but hesitated, looking back. You are going to deeply regret this decision, she warned. No, I told her softly, securing the victory. But you might. She walked swiftly off my porch without another word, driving away from the house she had hoped to quickly claim. That afternoon, I called Julia and instructed her to draft a formal, powerful letter to Golden Pines Sanctuary, definitively rejecting any and all arrangements that had been made in my name. I sent copies of this rejection to my primary physician and, crucially, to the state licensing board. I wasn't just defending myself. I was establishing an incontestable paper trail. No one would ever weaponize my age against me again. 2 days later, Clara returned. She brought me a wild bouquet of daffodils she had foraged from behind her school. She wore no makeup, displayed no pretenses, and hugged me with fierce, undeniable sincerity. Mom is absolutely furious, she whispered against my shoulder. I know, I said. Let her be. We settled onto the back patio swing. Clara spoke openly about her worries, college applications, her friend's obsession with superficial phone filters, how no one seemed to genuinely care about anything authentic anymore. I, in turn, told her stories about her grandfather, how he used to plant dahlias in the yard and speak to them as if they were his children. I told her about the time we danced barefoot in the kitchen after losing half our savings on a bad business investment. I described the sheer panic of holding Arthur when he was a toddler, coughing so severely I feared he would stop breathing. He wasn't always like this, I said softly, referring to my son. I know, Clara replied immediately. But he is now. She confessed that she wanted to spend more time here, that there was something about the house, about this place, that made her feel fundamentally grounded. I assured her that there would always be space. She didn't have to wait for a manufactured holiday to come home. She looked at me, her eyes brimming with sudden tears. You're the only adult in my life who tells the truth, she admitted. That night I composed a letter. Not to Arthur, nor to Veronica. I wrote a letter to myself. I meticulously recorded everything I could recall about my life. My strength, my deep-seated fears, my audacious dreams. I wrote about the day I became a mother, the day I became a widow, the day I felt utterly forgotten, and the day I finally remembered myself again. I folded the pages and placed them securely in the top drawer beside my bed. If anyone ever dared to attempt to rewrite my story, I wanted my own version to be the one that survived. The next few days passed in a welcome quiet. No more desperate voicemails from Arthur. No surprise, antagonistic visits. No sneaky, incriminating paperwork arriving at my door. Only myself, my garden, my tea, and the deep, abiding peace that came from decisively shutting down the storm they had secretly been brewing behind my back. I tended to my dahlias that morning, humming an old hymn I hadn't sung in decades. The sun was warm on my skin. The breeze carried the sharp scent of freshly cut grass. I wasn't dwelling on the betrayal. I wasn't plotting revenge. I was focused entirely on how liberating it felt to stand on my own porch, knowing beyond any shadow of a doubt that the property was still mine. Then I heard the engine noise. It wasn't Veronica's massive SUV. It was Arthur's old sedan, the car I had helped him purchase years ago when he couldn't afford the down payment. It pulled slowly into the driveway, as if uncertain of its welcome. He stepped out. He looked noticeably smaller than I remembered, lacking his usual business suit or his false, cheerful smile. He wore khakis and a wrinkled polo shirt, carrying the unmistakable look of a man who had finally realized his mother was not the oblivious fool he had taken her for. I stood at the edge of the porch, waiting. He walked up to the steps but did not climb them. "Ma," he began. "Can we talk?" "You've been talking for weeks, Arthur," I replied. "Just not to me." He looked down intensely at his shoes, like a child caught with forbidden sticky fingers. "I never meant to hurt you," he mumbled. "I honestly thought it was for the best." "No," I corrected him. "You thought it was easiest for you." He looked up, guilt stamped clearly on his face. "Veronica pushed it, you know how she is. She kept insisting you were starting to forget things, that it wasn't safe for you to continue living alone." I raised an eyebrow, challenging him. "What exactly did I forget, Arthur? Was it the PIN code I gave you access to? Or perhaps the will you never bothered to read but assumed would inevitably benefit you?" He offered no answer. "Do not blame your wife for the choices you signed your name to," I commanded. "I was scared," he admitted. "We have the girls, the house, the relentless bills. It's all overwhelming, and I just thought maybe it was time to start planning ahead for everyone's comfort." "So you planned a future that deliberately excluded me?" He summarized. "And did so behind my back." He inhaled deeply. "I'm sorry I didn't say anything to you," he said. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a clean envelope. "I brought this. It's a letter," he added. "Not from me. From Clara." That single detail made me pause. I walked down 2 steps, took the envelope from his hand, and opened it right there in front of him. It was handwritten, unformatted, just raw, honest words. "Dear Grandma, I know things have been truly awful lately, and I feel like I should have spoken up sooner. When I realized what they were planning, I didn't know how to talk without them immediately shutting me down. I was scared. But after I saw you last week, I wasn't scared anymore. You are the only person in this family who has ever truly made me feel seen. I don't care what they say about you. I know you are strong, and I know you are still sharp, and I know they were horribly wrong to do what they did. Love you. I am proud of you, and I want to spend much more time with you if you will still have me. Love, Clara." I folded the letter slowly and looked at Arthur. "She is a better person than both you and Veronica," I said. "I know," he whispered. I nodded toward the driveway. "You can go now." He looked momentarily like he wanted to argue or plead, but he refrained. He turned and walked back to his car. As he drove away, I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt profoundly tired. Tired of men who shrink and deflect when things become difficult. Tired of women who smile courteously while they attempt to bury you alive. Tired of pretending that forgiveness is an automatic, obligated response. Back inside, I placed Clara's letter carefully in my drawer, resting it beside the letter I had written to myself. I sat down, exhaled a deep, shaky breath, and closed my eyes. Later that afternoon, Julia stopped by to finalize the final piece of documentation. She handed me the new title for the house, now secured solely under my name, immune to any future power grabs or manipulations. "You absolutely did the correct thing," she confirmed. "Most people would have ignored the red flags until it was entirely too late." "I almost did," I replied softly. "Until a complete stranger accidentally handed me the naked truth in a cheap paper envelope." Julia offered a gentle smile. "It's remarkable how fate sometimes works." Before she left, she asked if I had any final wishes she needed to record, any enduring legacy instructions beyond the trusts we had already established. He nodded. "I want Clara to inherit this house when I pass," I told her. "Not because I owe it to her, but because she showed up. Because she asked uncomfortable questions when the others simply made callous decisions. And because she still knows how to love with her eyes wide open." Julia wrote it down. "Done." That evening, I retrieved my old worn recipe box, the one I hadn't dared to open in years. I flipped through the cards covered in flour dust and faint grease stains. Chicken pot pie, buttermilk biscuits, lemon pound cake. I took a new card and wrote a fresh title. Clara's first dinner. Ingredients: 1 granddaughter, 1 kitchen, 1 memory that matters. I placed it directly on top. From this day forward, I would cook only for the people who consciously chose to stay, not those who meticulously plotted my erasure. The following Sunday, Clara arrived with a canvas tote bag and an apron. She stood on my porch, looking far more mature than I remembered, not because of clothing or makeup, but because of the way she carried herself. Eyes steady, shoulders square. She was no longer a child trapped between warring parents. She had chosen her side, and she had chosen mine. "You ready to cook?" she asked, her voice light. "I've been ready since 1983, I declared, opening the door wide. We made chicken and dumplings entirely from scratch. She peeled the carrots too thickly and dropped the measuring spoon directly into the flour barrel, but I didn't care. She laughed easily at her own mistakes, wiping her hands on her jeans, asking genuine questions as if she truly desired to learn. I watched her stir the bubbling broth while humming along to the kitchen radio, and for a beautiful fleeting moment, I forgot the month, the damning envelope, the betrayal, and the Golden Pines scheme. All I saw was her. When dinner was prepared, we ate together at the kitchen table. No fancy blue rose china this time. Just 2 chipped plates and mismatched drinking glasses. The afternoon sun poured through the window like an old, reliable friend. We ate in comfortable silence, which, after the recent turbulence, felt like a blessing. Afterward, she helped me wash the dishes. We stood shoulder to shoulder, our hands wrinkled and wet in the soapy water. "Grandma," she asked softly, "are you truly never going to talk to Dad again?" I dried a plate carefully and set it on the rack. "I didn't say never," I corrected. "But forgiveness demands far more than a simple, forced apology. It requires fundamental change. I don't believe he knows how to change, Clara. And changing him is not my responsibility anymore. My job was to raise him. What he chooses to do with what I gave him, that is entirely on him now." She nodded, but I could tell the concept weighed heavily on her young chest. "You love him," I said. "And that is perfectly acceptable. But never allow that love to blind you to the truth. People who love you can still inflict deep pain. And people who hurt you do not always deserve a second chance, simply because they share your blood." She looked up at me with those clear, honest eyes and gave the only reply that mattered. "That is why I'm here, Grandma." That evening I showed her the garden. The dahlias were beginning to bloom. The moon hung low and wide, casting a silvery sheen across the flower beds. We sat on the porch swing and rocked slowly as the night descended. I told her stories about her grandfather, how he used to whistle while trying to fix the roof, how he once fell off a ladder and landed squarely in the rose bush, swearing hilariously until I brought him a large glass of iced tea. She laughed until her stomach hurt. It was the kind of night I had truly feared I had lost forever. Later, after she had gone home, I went to my room and opened the drawer where I kept the 2 letters. Hers, written in genuine love, and mine, written in defensive fear. I reread them both. Together, they articulated the full, complex story. Then I did something I had neglected for many years. I wrote a 3rd letter, a new promise, addressed only to myself. "Dear Eleanor, you are not what they called you. You are not old and inconvenient. You are not confused. You are not a burden. You are the root. You are the keeper of sacred stories. You are the woman who remembered herself just in time. Don't forget again. Not ever." I folded it and placed it with the others. The next morning I made coffee and sat at the dining room table with a real newspaper. Not the digital kind. I circled a small advertisement for a community storytelling group at the local library. "Seniors welcome. Bring your voice. Bring your truth. Bring your experience." Smiled. Later that week Julia called. "Are you certain you want to proceed with this?" she asked. "I am," I confirmed. She clicked her pen on the other end of the line. All right. I've finalized the updates to the will. Clara inherits the house, the savings, and the rights to your memoirs, if you ever decide to write 1 inch. I'm already brainstorming the title, I said. How does this sound? The day I was supposed to disappear. Julia laughed, a full, satisfying sound. That will certainly get some attention. Good, I said. Let the world see exactly what happens when you try to quietly bury a woman who still has fire left in her bones. On Saturday, I saw Veronica's SUV pass my street again. She didn't attempt to stop this time. Perhaps she had finally accepted that I wasn't going anywhere. Or perhaps she understood that she had lost a battle she never imagined I would fight. Either way, she drove off, and I remained precisely where I belonged. In my house, in my newfound power in my name. Not Eleanor the patient. Not Eleanor the dependent. Just Eleanor Vance, mother, grandmother, survivor. And the woman who ate alone on the holiday only to uncover a terrifying truth and ensure no one would ever erase her again.